I was in the theater dressing room and my agent sent the script over. Silent Lambs, and I thought it was a children's story. It's handy. So you're playing the part of a collector. So I read over there. Thought this is interesting. In 1991, Anthony Hopkins filmed a scene that exposed the truth about cinema's greatest villain. For 2 minutes he made the entire crew stop breathing. The director shouted it was the best thing he'd ever filmed. Critics who saw it said Hopkins deserved another Oscar just for that scene. But Jonathan Demme deleted. Why? Because it revealed something about Hannibal Lecter that would change everything we thought we knew about him. Thomas Harris didn't invent Hannibal Lecter out of thin air. The idea started in the 1960s when Harris was working as a journalist for Argosy magazine. He had gone to a prison in Mexico to interview a man named Dykes Simmons, an American who had murdered 3 siblings. But it wasn't Simmons who left a mark. It was the doctor treating him. Harris met a man called Dr. Salazar, polite, educated prison physician who spoke with charm and grace. Only later did Harris find out that this wasn't just a doctor. It was a convicted killer. The doctor's real name was Alfredo Bali Trevinho. He was a wealthy surgeon who had murdered his lover, Jesus Castillo Rangel, in 1959. He didn't just kill him, he dismembered the body with clinical precision and packed the remains into a small box, then buried it in his aunt's garden. He served 20 years in prison, got out, returned to medicine, and lived until 2009. But his cold manner, polished manners, and surgical skills stuck in Harris's mind. Years later they would become the core of Hannibal Lecter. When Harris first introduced Lecter in Red Dragon in 1981, he was just a secondary character. But by The Silence of the Lambs in 1988, Lecter had become unforgettable. A killer who spoke with elegance, quoted philosophy, and ate his victims with fine wine. He wasn't a brute. He was a refined nightmare. And he was about to become a movie legend. That nearly didn't happen. Gone Hackman, fresh off his Oscar win for The French Connection, bought the rights to The Silence of the Lambs. He planned to direct it, produce it, and play FBI agent Jack Crawford. John Hurt was supposed to be Lecter and Michelle Pfeiffer would be Clarice. Hackman was ready to take full control, but in 1989, he suddenly walked away. The reason: his daughter read the script and begged him not to do it. Hackman also admitted the story's violence made him uncomfortable. With him out, Orion Pictures scrambled to save the project. They turned to Jonathan Demme, a director known for quirky, heartfelt films. First, Demme didn't want to do it, but after reading the book he couldn't let it go. He saw something deeper, a story about power, fear, and a woman fighting to be heard. He signed on and started casting, but Orion Pictures had a bigger problem. By 1990, the studio was nearly bankrupt. They were $690 million in debt and losing big. At the Oscars that year, host Billy Crystal joked that Orion was in a coma. They were so desperate they sold the Addams Family to Paramount just to get back $14.6 million in cash. Paramount turned it into a $113 million hit. Orion's last hope was The Silence of the Lambs. They gave it a tight $19 million budget and hoped for a miracle. Then came the man who would become Lecter. Anthony Hopkins was doing theater in London when his agent called him about a script. The title confused him. The Silence of the Lambs sounded like a kid's movie, but he read just the first few pages and stopped. He called his agent back and said, "Is this an offer? I want it. This is the best role I've ever read." He hadn't even reached page 10. He didn't want to keep reading. If someone else had already taken the part, but it could have gone very differently. The role of Lecter was first offered to Sean Connery. Demme thought Connery had the brains and intensity for the role, but Connery said the script was disgusting and refused. Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, Dustin Hoffman, and even Morgan Freeman were considered. All passed. They couldn't see it. They were used to playing tough guys, but Lecter wasn't tough. He was terrifying. In a completely different way. He didn't punch. He whispered. Meanwhile, Clarice Starling almost wasn't Jodie Foster. Jonathan Demme wanted Michelle Pfeiffer. First, she was interested but eventually said no. The script disturbed her. She later said, "Evil won in the end, and I didn't want to put that into the world." Next up was Meg Ryan. She also passed, but Foster didn't give up. She pushed for the role even after winning an Oscar for The Accused. Screenwriter Ted Thowley had pictured her from the beginning. He said she had the right kind of intelligence. When she finally got the part, she made it her own. Hopkins didn't just play Hannibal Lecter, he designed him. He based Lecter's voice on HAL 9000 from 2001, A Space Odyssey, calm, robotic, and eerie. He imagined Lecter moving like a shark. Quiet, focused, deadly. He borrowed the cold stare from his own drama teacher, a man who could dismantle a student with just a look. Hopkins trained himself to not blink on camera. It made people uncomfortable, and that was the point. He also pulled from odd sources for the voice. He said Lecter's speech patterns had a bit of Truman Capote and even Katharine Hepburn. The result was chilling. He turned every line into something unsettling. Every sentence sounded like a trap. Then no one expected a horror film to drop on Valentine's Day. But on February 14, 1991, that's exactly what happened. Orion Pictures made a bold move by releasing The Silence of the Lambs, a film filled with cannibalism, murder, and psychological terror, right in the middle of a holiday known for roses and romance. At the time, February was where studios dumped movies they had no faith in. Audiences didn't typically rush to cinemas during the cold months, especially not for horror. But this wasn't a typical movie, and Orion wasn't playing it safe. That weekend, the gamble paid off. The film pulled in $13.8 million from just under 1,500 theaters. It shot straight